Hey, welcome back to our story and thanks once again for following along. We've only got a couple more episodes in this part of the adventure, but we wanted to take a moment to warn you that things will get a wee bit heavy before they get better. Over the next 2 episodes, we discuss experiences of intense mental health distress, which touch on the topics of self-harm, suicide, and even abuse. If these are sensitive touch points for you, we recommend caution as you go into it. But as always, find someone you can trust to talk about it. However, it's not all doom and gloom, so please enjoy the journey and experience the lows and the highs along with us as we navigate this next chapter. And as always, stay classy. Hello and welcome back to This Is Our Story. Kia ora, Briar.
Kia ora.
Welcome back to you to join me. We are live, well I am live from a hotel room in Wellington and back to kind of normal programming in terms of calling each other on Skype. It was nice while it lasted, being able to sit in the same room, but alas, these things do not last. And I had to quickly duck out of the house before you decided to pop that little one out in the lounge.
Only so much as a sneeze holding him in right now.
There are some things that brothers are not supposed to witness, and I think there's probably one. Okay, we've got a lot to cover today in this particular episode. We've only planned for 2 more, so we've got to kind of keep moving through so we don't hold you captive for longer than you want to be. Anyway, straight into story time. Just wanted to quickly cover some of the lighter things that perhaps we miss from the old days. As a millennial, I do notice this. As much as I hate admitting that I'm getting older, one of the character traits of, I think, millennials is just moaning about things that used to be better in the old days, which makes me feel like a real granddad. But it is what it is. And so I made a list of a few of the things that I miss from back in the day, quote unquote. First one I have is actually MSN. I don't know, Brian, I don't know if you got into MSN when it was out.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, if you think about it, how cool was it, right? You could have this kind of personalized space. It was like a gateway drug into coding, which I was not intelligent enough to get into, but I appreciated that other people did, where you could do some web coding and create cool designs on your own page. And I always remember that your top friends.
Yes, 10.
How crazy is that? You could
friends.
rank your friends. But my favorite part was having a theme, like a song for your page. So you'd put your favorite song and then people would come to visit you and then they'd hear it straight away. How cool is that?
Was that not MySpace? I thought that was MySpace.
No, you're right. Yeah, MySpace. Yeah. But the MSN Messenger, MySpace, that was our kind of early social network, really.
The first of its kind, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was something I definitely appreciate more than what social media is these days, I think. And kind of on that, I think I do obviously take part in, social mediaing, but I kind of miss a time when I didn't have that, as much as I would prefer to message people on social media or whatever. I still hate to call people, and I used to still hate calling people back then too. But there is just something about not having to know what people are up to, which you didn't think you'd miss it until you can't anymore. It's like everyone has to tell us what they're doing. And I do try as much as possible not to tell everybody what I'm up to throughout the day. I don't know about you.
There's nothing better than
Instagrammer.
Yeah, there's nothing better than the adrenaline rush you get from that noise that the MSN made when your chat box would come up, oh, someone's messaged me. Yeah. And when they were typing.
Yeah.
I definitely remember that adrenaline rush. Ooh. I have to agree though. Although we do spend a lot of time wasting on social media, I do wish that life was simpler. Not having those things, so many things I could be doing rather than sitting around on social media. So yes.
Yeah. And I swore I'd never be one of those kind of scrollers. on social media, and I have become that. And I do worry about people's attention spans. They're getting shorter and shorter.
I 100% can say that for myself. Like, I could be watching TV and scrolling at the same time and still know what's going on, on the TV and what I'm reading. It's shocking, really.
Yeah. The other thing I've written to here is no Netflix. And I'll be the first to say that I love a lot of things about Netflix. However, it does take away a real appreciation for what it was like to, if you wanted to watch something later, you had to record it. And I mean, we didn't have a TV growing up, but we're obviously aware of this, and going to the video store and choosing your movies for a Friday night for a sleepover or whatever. That I had some of my favorite memories with sleepovers, watching movies on the old VCR with my friends. Yeah, and would come away with like a stack of 5 movies and then just watch them all weekend. And
then debating whether you were going to spend the $10 on the new release, which is only an overnight one.
Oh yeah.
Or whether you'd go for the whatever it was, $7 for a whole week of one that wasn't a new release.
Never wanted the not, always had to be new releases, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, but in terms of other things that I miss, they're probably maybe a little bit more specific to us, but growing up in New Zealand and country New Zealand, we just had so much freedom and so much space to explore, right? And one thing I know from growing up in the 80s and 90s is that there were a lot less safety nets, literal and figurative safety nets, which sure, we did get injured. It wasn't safe, but there was something really special about that, right? Because we didn't go out worried. I mean, I did. Perhaps I was a bit of a sensitive child. But generally, if you wanted to do something, you just kind of did it, and you didn't have people looking over your shoulder all the time, freaking out about how much danger you were in. Yeah, like being out late on the street, riding bikes, and just going off for walks for hours on end. And for us specifically, being on the farm for hours and hours, I would go off on my own, and no one would ever check in because, I didn't have a phone. So, anything could have happened. But
I remember going, like, when I was running away from home, but it's a bit hard when you live rurally. I got on my horse and went off on the farm. And I remember it was dark when I came back, but nobody cared that I wasn't there. They just were like, oh, well, she'll come back when she's hungry.
Yeah, well, because I guess you can't even really understand, like, projecting back. It's hard not to project because we have the ability to stay in contact with people anytime, anywhere, we can't imagine not being able to contact someone. But it was just so normal. We would just basically, for all intent and purpose, just be invisible if we weren't within, shouting distance, if that makes sense. And that was just completely normal, and that was great. And I do miss that. I love being able to contact people now. It's great. But
how did we survive without it? Like, it's so hard to imagine.
Yeah, but we did okay. We did okay. You just get better at face-to-face communication.
Yeah.
Or if you're like extreme introvert like I was for a while, you just avoid it altogether and you just stay by yourself. Yeah. The last thing I was going to mention was just kind of simple games that we used to play as kids. Like no screen time, obviously, because there were no smartphones, no iPads, no computers in our house, and it was just you play whatever you can have and you create in your imagination. Really, it was just the classic games like hide and seek or spotlight, which is hide and seek in the dark, and marbles or board games. All your friends coming over and playing board games into the late hours, and just very basic things. We didn't need technology to.
Just simple fun, wasn't it? Good old-fashioned, wholesome fun.
Yeah. We didn't need technology to dictate what we would do with our free time because we had enough creativity to figure it out for ourselves. So, yeah, I do miss that.
Yes.
But, having said that, we can't get those things back. Maybe some of them, but it's pretty hard to function without, what we have now. But sometimes I think it's good to just appreciate some of those simpler things. Anyway, I feel like
back to where we left off.
I enter the subject with fear and trepidation. So where I left off, I just was talking about how things with my partner had gotten quite intense. Yeah. So we'd just joined this big kind of aspirational church. We were getting involved. I was getting really, really involved in music and volunteering, and it was taking up a lot of my time. But really, it was a big passion project for me that really was, I think in hindsight, I was trying to just distract myself from what was going on at home. And I didn't mind being out of the home 6 nights a week because it just kept me busy. So I shared a story at the end of the last episode about how my partner had confiscated my credit card for using it to take a taxi home. It was like a $20 fare, and she cut it up in front of me and then threw it away. That story, as intense as it might sound on its own, was just one particular event of a number of different things that kind of really increased in intensity of her trying to kind of exercise control over our relationship and just over our lives, I guess. She was always the one who handled the finances, not necessarily like there was no discussion that was like, okay, you'll do this and you'll do this. It was just she
needed that control.
Yeah, but she was good at it. She was good at numbers, but she had a very stingy streak in her. She hated spending money on what she deigned to be wasted spending, and so that just meant not really going out to do fun activities very often. It was we do not spend on frivolous things. We don't go on holidays. We did go on a few holidays, but it was like months and months of saving up and preparing. This is actually, in terms of the purpose of this podcast, right, is looking back at who we are today, what caused that. And I think now whilst I think saving's important, I also have a real appreciation for having spare cash to have fun.
Enjoy life.
And that is a really big priority for me now, and that's basically where that came from. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into too many depressing stories, but over these couple of years, probably 2012 to 2014, after coming back to Melbourne, things they were just really intense all the time, and I felt like I could never relax. There was just drama at every corner, and it would come when I least expected it. And I think on reflection, I know that she was really insecure, but she wouldn't accept that as a reason for the way that she was reacting to me. So, for example, she would compare the way our relationship was to other people who seemed happy all the time. And she would say things like, see the way that he treats her?
So it was put back on you.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you get me gifts? Why don't you write me letters anymore? It was constantly, I wasn't matching up to what her expectations were of me. And to be fair,
not being accountable for her own actions in the relationship.
Yeah, but I mean, I am willing to admit that I could have done better, because everyone always can do better. But obviously, it's not as simple as that. And in order,
that would not have solved the issues.
No, I mean, they were much, much deeper than that. And if I did do those things, it would have felt inauthentic. Yeah. And there was that same thing I mentioned a few episodes ago about how she had this thing about not going to sleep angry, right? So even until this time, we were just late into the night, just going over and over and over again. And often it would just be me sitting in silence, because I just literally had nothing to say, because everything I would say would just lead to further arguments or disagreement on her part. And that would frustrate her even more, because I wouldn't be able to express what I was actually wanting to say. And it was just I would just freeze, like completely shut down. And there was this stage of my life where I just became really scared of confrontation because my brain would just stop working completely. And that was really hard because I lost all sense of confidence in who I was as a person. And I've heard since then, like in recent times, that people had noticed this, but I wasn't aware that it was happening. I am now, obviously, looking back, but I wasn't aware that I was really losing a sense of who I was. But I just remember in those couple of years, things started to get physical in terms of how she would, like, I mean, I mentioned right at the beginning how she would have these kind of uncontrollable rages. There's like all this kind of emotion that she just couldn't keep in and had to get out. And she would often put that on herself. Like she would physically like hurt herself because she didn't know how to control it. So she'd be like whacking her head and like beating her chest and whacking things around her. That was the early days. But then fast forward a few years, she would still do that at times, but then it would start
behavior
coming onto me. So I do remember very clearly one time, you know, after lying in bed for hours, going over some very minor point that she believed I wasn't getting, and like I wasn't respecting her enough on this particular point or whatever. I don't know. Some of these things were just so significant that they've just flown out of my mind. But I just fell asleep. It got really late at night, and I could not stay awake any longer.
That would have angered her further.
Oh, and I fell asleep. I just drifted off, and I was woken up to like a really hard punch, like she just hit me. And then it started off again because how dare I fall asleep in the middle of an argument? And it was just like, it was such a self-defeating cycle, and just never got anywhere. And because she was so convinced that I didn't love her and so convinced that I didn't care about even trying to love her, she would do anything to get my attention and to like try and wake me up to how bad it was. And so this led to frequent threats to self-harm, frequent threats to take her own life. There are a number of times where she would be screaming at me, why don't you love me? Why don't you care? What will it take for you to love me? What will it take for you to care for me? And her running into the kitchen, grabbing knives and holding them to her wrists and saying, do you want me to cut me, or do you want me to hurt myself? Will that make you love me? Will that make you pay attention to me? Is this what you want? And
gosh, it's so exhausting.
It's
emotionally.
I mean, what do you
around someone
say
like that?
To that? Obviously, you've got to talk them off the ledge, but then how do you
move forward
respond?
From
like the fallout from that, because then it obviously it doesn't bring you closer together. It does in the moment because you're like, I've got to prevent this. I've got to make sure this is a safe environment for both of us. And then there'll be some kind of short period of reconciliation, but then inside, like it's not real.
Did you feel the need to overcompensate that love sort of post those moments?
I mean, it would be making promises that I knew I couldn't keep in order to talk her off the ledge. I think I understand this much more clearly now, but there was no genuine love on my part. Because I'd never known what love was. I didn't know what the proper thing was to do. I just did what I thought was necessary, which was to give in as much as possible. And I mean, so unhealthy, right? And I mean, how do you maintain a relationship like that? And whilst that kind of stuff is generally in the home, we had flatmates. They were definitely aware of stuff going on, and I could see the discomfort. They didn't necessarily see those really, really extreme things, but many, many other kind of small microaggressions they saw many, many times, and I could see the awkwardness in this, and on their faces, and I was very aware of what they were thinking, but I never talked about it with them because, number one, too awkward. Number two, I didn't want them to think that I was being disrespectful to her, because husbands must respect their wives.
But also your view would have been so warped anyway, like you wouldn't have known what way was up at that point.
Still, don't know what a good relationship is, right? Because it's still my first relationship. I think it was about this stage, because this is maybe a couple of years, maybe about a year or so before things actually finally came to an end. But I started to imagine what life might be like, not on my own, but with somebody else. So I would see other relationships and see how happy they were, but I didn't. I don't know. I was starting. Yeah, exactly. And I was waking up to maybe this is not okay. And was just mad because at this point we would have been together 8 or 9 years, or 8 years maybe. And to be putting up with this constant walking around in eggshells, how I could ever assume that was just normal, is beyond comprehension now. Anyway, church life was, despite all this stuff in the background, was going really well. But I was just consumed by it, so much so that I was looking for belonging, so much so that it just took over my life completely. It saturated my life until I had no friends outside of church. It was my whole life, but that was okay for me. I was okay with that because I would never call it indoctrination, because, people who haven't been in church always consider people in church to be indoctrinated. I would not have considered that because it was just a slow boil for me. I wasn't jumping out of that hot pool.
And it was probably the security and connection you were craving, which you weren't getting elsewhere.
Yeah, and there is I think I may have mentioned this in the last one, but there's a lot of unhealthy stuff going on in my church life in the background, which I didn't notice until later on. But I was kind of blind to it at the stage, and I really needed that purpose and a place to be. That I needed a family, and I needed something to be passionate about. That meant I wasn't at home. My partner was also into music, and so we were part of the music team together, which, to be honest, even at the time, I wanted it to just be my thing. There was several points where there would be drama involving her and people within the music team, because she had a very specific way of wanting things to be done, and she had no qualms about expressing her views. So there was definitely some awkwardness there, and that kind of ruined the music thing for me. Yeah, because I had to be the middleman, and she expected me to take her side, and so many times I cannot, I never said this, but I just could not. Some of the things were just really embarrassing. Anyway, I'm just going to fast forward a little bit, but there was a moment where the church announced, or the leaders at the church announced, that they would be opening up a new campus in Thailand. And this was very left field for this church. It was a big deal, and it was a very exciting thing at this stage for the church, or the church family, and the church was in a stage of growth, and I don't know what was going on in the background that led them to think that Bangkok would be a good place to go, but it's really strange. It's hard to describe now, but I remember very clearly being in the service when this announcement was made, and straight away when they said it, I just felt something in my chest, my heart beat really fast. I felt like I was just kind of transported somewhere else, and I honestly felt like something was speaking to me and telling me, that's for you. And it's really, really strange to talk about this because I'm probably what I would consider agnostic now. I don't attend church. I don't really think about Christianity. I don't really necessarily consider myself, I definitely wouldn't consider myself religious anymore. I don't attend church or anything like that. But this moment felt so authentic, even in my memory. Looking back, I can 100% say that it felt so real.
So what do you think that was now? Do you think that was, you going, this could be my chance to get out of,
Maybe later on, I would say that, but in that particular moment, I just all I can call it is a calling, and that these are the words that we use in church, right? I just felt called, and the word was, this is for you, go. Obviously, when it comes to like getting a feeling and interpreting it in words, that 100% can be put down to science, but the feeling itself is very real. And I just knew that I really, really wanted to go to Thailand. I'd never considered going to Asia ever before. In fact, I was always interested in Europe, right? So this was very strange for me. I kept it to myself for a while, and I was afraid to bring it up to my partner. I didn't want to suggest it to her, and partly I just wanted to see if she would end up feeling the same thing when she heard about it. She wasn't with me at the time. She hadn't attended that service or whatever, but when they announced it, I don't think she had the same feeling straight away. But I remember that we had a conversation about it later on, and I remember her saying, "Oh, so what do you think about this Thailand thing? Like, how did you feel about that?" I'm like, how about you tell me what you think first? and because I just wanted to see if she was
put your feelers out,
yeah. And she shared that she thought maybe this could be something that we might be able to be involved in.
And it's crazy that she was open to that idea.
Yes, yeah, and this is why at the time it felt like what we would call such a God thing.
Yeah.
And you can understand with all the other shit that's been going on in the background, to be on the same page about something it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of shared the fact that I'd had this moment, and I felt that I used the collective we, had been called to go. I think it was actually a very personal thing, and I didn't necessarily think of it as a thing that her and I should do together. But obviously when you're married, you do everything together, so whatever. And that kind of set a process in motion about where we were just making plans to see if it was actually feasible. And I think it was over around about 6 months, maybe 3 to 4 months of deciding, and then looking at the logistics of it, and then meeting with people at the leadership at the church about whether we could be actually involved with the team going over, and then other random details. It was like a process of about 6 months, I think, in total, of from the very first moment to, okay, this is actually happening, before we would actually announce it. So yeah, that was a big deal. It was a really big deal to kind of pack up everything and get over to this country, which I knew nothing about. I'd been to Thailand once before, and a stopover when I went to India a few years before. But I don't know, this brings up the whole adventure thing again, right? Because I'd always wanted to see the world, but see it through an adventurer's lens. As much as I loved Europe and I loved the history and just the diversity, it didn't feel quite adventurous enough for me, I think. And I was starting to get really tired of the predictability of Western society, starting to get a little bit disillusioned maybe, and I just kind of wanted to get away from it. I didn't really know all of this at the time, but this is looking back. Anyway, so my partner, she ended up being able to find a teaching job, which she interviewed for from Melbourne, for an international school in Bangkok. And then a few things came together, and I ended up getting a position with a charity based in Bangkok. It was a volunteer position, but based in Bangkok, and they were based up in the north. So it would involve a little bit of travel there as well. So, well, all of these things, all these pieces coming together, it was, wow, God is really involved in this. He's authentically called us to go to Thailand and be a part of this new thing that God is doing in Bangkok, be a part of this spreading our kind of our church values and helping save the world. I never saw myself as an evangelist, and I still don't think I wanted to be an evangelist, but I still wanted to be a part of that movement, that growth, that expanding of the church bubble.
And it's just exciting, right? Being called, so to speak,
100%.
to go to another country. It's like, oh, for the first time in years, I feel excited about something.
Yeah, and that's when I talk about church now. The only thing I miss about church life is being a part of something bigger than myself. And at this particular moment, there could not have been a bigger event to be a part of. And everybody, well, I'll be honest, I enjoyed the attention because now we were pioneers. Everybody knew who we were. Everybody was congratulating us, proud of us, sending us constant messages of affirmation and support. And, you know, people would pray for us. Even up in front of the church, we would be recognized and acknowledged. That's quite intoxicating. For me, as a person, I've mentioned this before, I needed validation. I would hesitate to say I needed to be noticed, but I wanted people to appreciate me because I always worked hard. And as much as I'd sold myself out for this church life, I always felt like because I was perhaps not as confident and I didn't put myself out there as much as others. I was always someone that got kind of pushed to the background. And so to be in the kind of center of it, in the limelight, was like, wow, this is...
For once you weren't just a worker bee, you know, there's hundreds of those, you're center of, you know, the attention.
I wasn't just like anybody else. I was like, wow, this is... Yeah, I'm the special one now. People are really appreciating me. And at the time, of course, I would say, oh, it's all about God. It's all about God. It's all about growing the kingdom.
While reveling in the limelight.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's human nature, though, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. What was an interesting part of this whole process before we left, though, was that we had to have meetings with leadership to confirm whether they would be happy with us to go. And we did have questions from... Like one of the pastors who I mentioned in the last episode had met with us, right, about relationship troubles. And so he met with us and was like, are you sure that you're okay? Like, are you guys going to be okay going over together?
At least he checked.
Yeah.
And asked.
Yeah. But I said yes, because what else would I say?
Of course, yeah.
I'm committed. Like, there's no way. Even though I 100% knew that we were not okay. I will say that very clearly. Was it all about me? Part of it was about me. I don't know. It's hard to gauge whether it was about a calling or about getting away.
And probably just something else to focus on too, you know, put your energy into.
Yeah, I know I wanted to get out. I know I wanted to escape. And this was the perfect opportunity to have some adventure with a purpose behind it. And I know this now. But
with her actually agreeing to it for once.
Exactly. Yeah, I knew we weren't okay, and I think she knew we weren't okay as well. But we were in too deep at this stage, and we were just like, we're going. And obviously God is behind this, so we'll fix it out. We'll fix it up. We'll figure it out once we get there, and things will be okay. So we got to... Just going to kind of breeze through a couple of details. We got to Thailand around about July, I think it was June, July 2014. And Thailand is like, I love Thailand. And it was, I don't know, it was just like I finally felt like I just hit my place. It was like I was a new person, and I reveled in every moment, the sights, the sounds, the smells, as terrible as they are, even the stuff that many people find uncomfortable, like the heat and the spiciness of the food, or just the inability to communicate with the locals. I loved it all. And my partner, if you've been paying attention to any of the previous episodes, you would know that she would not have found it as such a smooth transition.
Overwhelming, overstimulating.
Yeah. Well, we were at this school, right? It was a Christian school. We were living on site for a little while. And she pretty much went from the church bubble into the school bubble. And like, this is like full on Christian and a bit of kind of old school Christian environment. And I didn't really like it all that much. It was just a little bit too constrained for me, too traditional and too safe. And I spent as much time as I could getting out and exploring. And I was doing this this work for this charity, which I really enjoyed. It gave me a few opportunities to travel up to the north of Thailand, which was really cool. But due to the nature of the position, it was a new role. And they, obviously couldn't pay me. And there was no real understanding at that time of what this role should be or could be. And so I just kind of ran out of work to do. And I also we just ran out of money. I was forced to find a teaching job, which is terribly ironic because I'd spent all these years
avoiding it,
trying to escape the shadow cast by my teaching degree. And here I was being forced back into it. But this is where the kind of story really kind of got a bit more interesting for me, because I got into this teaching job. It was like an ESL, English as a Second Language school. It's so much fun teaching kids. I absolutely took to it like a duck to water. It was crazy how much I loved teaching, considering how long I thought I'd hate it. But I got into it and I was having a great time. But I was also exposed to a lot of different people that were a million miles away from my Christian buddies. And I found that incredibly refreshing, just to be around quote unquote normal people who didn't obsess about church services and prayer meetings and youth meetings and all this kind of stuff. It was just so good to just be me. And I really did feel like I was becoming a different version of myself, but not a fake version.
Genuine.
Like a genuine version of who I thought I was supposed to be, like just having fun and having laughs and going out and drinking. I wasn't really getting drunk or anything at this stage, but just going out and having a good time. Although things with my partner by this stage, we were off-site, off campus from the school, and things were getting really challenging. She hated that I would be out with friends late at night. Obviously, I hadn't had these opportunities because I didn't have many close friends back in Melbourne. And so to have these people who were taking me out drinking and were having lots of fun and then coming back late, that she struggled with that. And I honestly probably could have handled that better, but I didn't care. I just wanted to live my life. And I guess I was starting to discover some independence, which I guess is only natural to discover independence. But I guess when you're in a committed relationship, you need to negotiate that carefully, because I think it's great to have independence, but you've got to be able to respect the other party in a relationship, right? And I definitely could have done that better, but it was just all the history had just built up, and I was just kind of learning to become myself again.
Did you find you were getting maybe more confident too in yourself? So
yes,
you're having fun, you're sort of finding, sounds really cliche, but finding yourself.
And finding myself in Thailand, which is also cliche.
Yeah.
But I was also, because I was becoming more confident, I was sticking up for myself more. And that just was leading to further conflict that was becoming difficult to manage. And it was about this stage, kind of late 2014, that we actually started sleeping in separate beds because we just couldn't be in each other's company. I don't think it was my decision. It was hers, but she just had so convinced herself that I didn't love her anymore, which is obviously true, but
was that a bit of a
she,
relief though that she decided that? So you're like, oh, finally some space.
yeah, but I could tell that she was hoping that I would come to my senses. It was all me. It was all my fault.
Of course.
Yeah. And I think this is probably the best point to pause. I mean, obviously, I've been dominating this particular conversation, but why don't we just switch it back to you? I know you don't necessarily have as much to share for these intervening years, but just to kind of, because we're about to meet up again in the story. So I'll give you a chance to catch up before that.
So I guess while you were just sort of heading down the path of independence and freedom and things were getting worse in your relationship, it was the complete opposite for me. As I mentioned in the last episode, you know, I'd just gotten to a new relationship and I was really happy and felt really at peace for the first time in a long time. This guy was just so grounding for me, and it felt so good to be sort of in a good space. And I was living in London at the time and he was in North Yorkshire, and we were travelling back and forth to see each other for was about a year and a half actually, or maybe even slightly more, which was quite hard, but he worked shifts, so he would come down sometimes like midweek and I'd be working, but he'd come along with me and we'd hang out with the kids together because I was nannying, and it was all just fun and exciting being in a new relationship and in a happy place. And we went on a few holidays together and, you know, all those fun things you do at the beginning of a new relationship. And yeah, things were just really good, getting to know each other and just realizing that I was so happy. So
how did you, because, you know, you'd gone through this really traumatic stage, you know, just a couple of years prior, did you feel like you were dealing with that stuff?
I guess because I was happy, it kind of tricks you into thinking you have dealt with it, because it's not coming to the forefront of your mind all the time, because you're in a happy place, right? But I think I probably had just pushed it to the side, really, and I hadn't really emotionally dealt with those things that I probably should have. But they had resurfaced a bit later, and I think over the years I have been able to deal with those things. But initially, no, I don't think I had. And it was quite tricky telling mum and dad that, you know, that I was in a new relationship, and of course they knew that I was still technically married to my ex, and that didn't agree with them at all. And eventually I decided I was done doing the long distance relationship and I wanted to move, because it wasn't an option for him to come to London. I'd done 5 years in London. I was kind of like, yeah, I'm ready to sort of move out of London for a bit of a quieter lifestyle. And I decided to move up to North Yorkshire to live with him. And
which is a big decision in itself.
Yeah,
sacrificing
huge.
Everything.
Yep, like completely starting afresh with, you know, I didn't have any friends up there. Like the people I knew were ones that he'd introduced me to when I had gone up to visit. And we decided to buy a house together, which is another like huge milestone in life.
Hold on, I mean, some of the stuff is actually all completely new as well. So not just big decisions, but a lot of new decisions, being the house. You never owned a house before.
No.
And at this stage, how long had you been together?
So when I moved up there, we'd been together a year and a half, and we bought the place just like when I moved up there, we moved into the new house together. And
was this like scary for you at all?
Actually, no, not at all. It was the most like at peace I had ever felt, and it felt right, and it was the most easy transition. Like for most people, you know, moving in with someone new, especially when you've been doing a long distance relationship, You feel like you don't really know the person, and you find out things that you're like, irritating. And but it wasn't like that at all. It was such a cool feeling to be in the same space, doing things together and not having to worry about, I've got to catch the train early tomorrow to go back to London. And it was just such a cool time, and setting up the house.
Very refreshing, but very unusual to have such an easy experience. So obviously, and like I know for myself, whenever I think that things are easy, I'm kind of expecting something really shit to happen.
Yeah.
Like just around the corner. Did you ever have that feeling?
No, never. And he never gave me that feeling. And this is why I knew it was right, because of how it sounds so cliche, but deep down, like, how does this person make you feel? And never once did I question my decision to be with this person or to move in together. And it was such a good time. Although apart from, like, mum and dad weren't very happy that I had decided to move in with this person. He completely non-religious, wasn't into, or never has been, never will be into that kind of thing. So that bothered mum and dad quite a bit, and mum had a conversation with me saying, I don't want you to move in with him until you're officially divorced, because in her mind it was a box that needed to be ticked. You're divorced and then it's okay. And I said to her, Mum, look, it's happening. I'm moving in with him, and eventually I did get divorced legally, but
how long did it take for you to get that done?
Quite a while, because my ex was sorting it. He was living in Australia and I was there, and it comes down to money, and you have to actually physically go to court to renounce it or whatever and sign some paperwork. So it did take some time, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from moving in with this guy who I love deeply. So
and obviously I imagine you didn't really have any feelings about the divorce by that time.
No, I just wanted to get it over and done with, just so I could close that chapter, really. So no feelings. But that sort of took us up to about, where we sort of came back together again, which was 2014, was it?
Yeah.
So
I mean, you were just like entering this stage of stability, and I was about to kind of enter this time of quote unquote chaos. But at that point in time, we kind of intersected once again, because in the background we had this kind of family stuff going on. We had Mum had told us that she had some concerns about Dad's health, and this had been going on for a little while, and there were things that we were learning about him that were at first very unexpected, a real surprise. And that was really tough, I think.
It was quite upsetting to hear.
I mean, I didn't know how to react myself, because when it came to my parents, I wasn't super emotionally engaged, but it was still like, whoa, shit, things, it's just, shit's just got real. And it was around about this time that I had decided, I think Mum and Dad had decided to go and visit you, and they wanted to have it as a surprise. I can't remember who organised the surprise, but
I'm pretty sure you contacted my partner at the time and said, we're planning on coming over. So I had no idea. We wanted
a surprise trip. Yeah. So it was going to be our parents and myself and my partner linking up and then arriving at your house in Yorkshire to surprise you.
At Christmas, wasn't it?
For Christmas, yeah. And that was a really exciting idea, and it was really cool, and no one in the family was aware of all the drama that was going on between my partner and I. So that it was just another distraction for me. I felt I was a little bit worried about how this whole trip thing would go with all this shit in the background. But I was like, you know what? We'll make it work, because I'm not going to sacrifice this trip. And I don't remember many of the specifics of the leading up to the organising and everything like that. But this is probably the first time actually I'd had direct contact with your partner, actually, at this point because we hadn't really spoken. So that that was a positive experience, all in all. Anyway, we go on this trip. We arrive, and the surprise goes like clockwork. We meet up with parents. We travel up together in the train, and then we show up, and then we meet up with you and your partner in Yorkshire. And quite an emotional moment for you, even though you had some idea that it was going to happen, right?
Well, I think at the time I remember thinking I had worked out that maybe you and your partner were coming, but I had no idea that Mum and Dad were going to be there. So I thought I'd worked out the surprise, but I hadn't.
Yeah.
So it was a bit overwhelming to be like, oh, everyone's here.
Yeah. And it was so this trip, it was such a lot of stuff happened on this particular trip. I don't know if we have the time to go into it actually in this episode, but I guess maybe I'll stop it there and we'll pick up straight away at this point because this was, I won't say the beginning of the end, it was the end of the end.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. But there's a lot to unpack about what happened because it did have long-lasting effects on me and the family as well. So we'll talk about that in more detail in the next episode, which hopefully I've said this before, but maybe the last one. I just can't predict
how that goes.
Can't predict it.
There's always more than you think there is to unpack.
I'm sorry, everyone, if this is getting too dark. It's just I'm trying to keep it relatively emotionless and just stick to the facts. But the facts as they are they're kind of tough to process. And it's just tough for me to process too. And I'm feeling much better about it now, but I will admit that there have been a few weeks after talking about this stuff that it's been hovering around in the background for me, and having to dig it all up again has been
triggering.
Yes, to say the least. But we'll see how we go for the final chapter. But thanks again for joining us, and we will catch you again very soon. Thanks, everyone. Ka kite anō.
Bye.